Hello makers, and welcome to Share Stitchery. I'm Catherine Harris, and each week I release new videos on sewing tutorials and DIYs. So if you want to learn more, hit that subscribe button down below, and don't forget to hit the bell notification so you know when I release a new video. This week I was inspired by this red and white striped fabric. I thought it would be perfect for the Betty dress, but with a few alterations. So I decided not to go with a circle skirt because that is going to affect how the stripes go, and it still looks really cute when you do a circle skirt with stripes, but I wanted all of my stripes to go down vertically and then have a horizontal panel across the waist. I just thought that that would be a cute little design detail, and then I also added some piping to the neck and armholes. And I had seen a photo from ModCloth with a dress that was very similar to that, except it had a gathered waistband and it didn't have the vertical waistband with the corresponding stripes there. That being said, I'm excited to share this tutorial with you. So let's get to it. Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum. Betty dress with a fitted bodice, pleated skirt, and piping trim instead of the circle skirt. So let's start with the bodice. So we're going to do the darts right now. So you can see that we have a bust dart and two waist darts. And we are just going to do those darts as we usually do, where I like to trace it onto the pattern, and then I like to take my pins and put it through one side and then check the back side to make sure that they line up nice and evenly. Then we're going to stitch from the bottom and make sure you tie off those ends and not backstitch so you've got a nice seamless dart here. Now we're going to take it to the iron and press them. Those go down and those go towards the side seams. Now we're going to stay stitch from the top neck edge. Make sure you're starting at the top and going towards the center when you're doing this stay stitching. And this is just to help stabilize the neck edge. So next I've serged the edges of the bodice here on both side seams here. Now we're going to attach them at the side seams and the shoulder seams. So we are just going to pin that in place. So working with these stripes, I made sure to pattern match as best I could with all of the horizontal stripes going down in the bodice as well as the skirt. So I'm just pinning these right here and just matching up all of the notches here. And then we're going to stitch along the side seams here. So this is what it looks like when it's all done. I've pressed the seams open. And that's our bodice. So next I wanted to add an additional 2.5-inch strip as wide as the bodice to add a contrasting belt detail. So what I've done here is I'm matching up the side seams, and then I am measuring 2 inches from the bottom, and I'm placing right sides together, and then I'm going to pin in that place, and I'm going to stitch along the bottom edge of this. So first I'm matching up the side seams so that those seams match up perfectly, and then I'm going to pin the rest of the strip along the bodice, going 2 inches from that bottom here. And that's what it looks like. I've given it a good press as well so it sits nicely, and then I can trim off the excess from that band and then stitch along the bottom. So now that I've stitched along the bottom, I'm just cutting off the excess band here, and we've got our bodice piece. Now the pleated skirt hack with pockets. So for the pockets, you're going to move 6 inches down, and you're going to place a mark, and then you're going to place your pockets face down. Just also note that what I did to create the skirt is I created 3 panels, the width of the fabric, and then the length of the skirt that I wanted. So I wanted a knee-length skirt, so I cut as far as I wanted on the knee-length skirt and had 3 of those panels. And so on 2 of the panels, we're going to attach the pockets, and so that's the front panel and the side panels. And this is the other side here because we got to match them up. And then the back panel I actually cut in half because we are going to need to insert an invisible zipper in that. So I'm just putting the pockets in so you can see that I've stitched that and serged around the edges. Then we're just going to understitch right here to make sure the seam allowances lie nice and flat. And now we are going to put them together. So the skirt front and the skirt side pieces are going to go together. Then we're going to stitch down and then the perimeter of the pocket and then all the way down the edge of the skirt here. So don't forget to backstitch for security here. And then right here, you can see that I'm just pivoting here and you can see where the pocket lines up. And so you want to butt those stitches up nicely together so it looks very seamless and you can't even tell that there's a pocket there until you slip your hand in. And that's coming up on the other edge. And so you can see where our seam allowance here, and we've got 5/8 of an inch seam allowance in this pattern. So I'm just following that. If you serge the edges, it's really nice because the edge of your presser foot actually goes up against these serge lines. Now we're going to cut in along the pocket. Don't snip the stitches, but just cut in here. This way we can press those seams open so it lays nice and flat. So give that a nice good press. And this is what it'll look like. And next we're going to work on doing the pleats with the bodice. So the first thing you want to do is you want to match up those side seams with the bodice where the pockets are, because those kind of tell you where to distribute some of that weight with the pleats, and then match up your edges. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just doing a bit of math where I'm trying to figure out how large I want the pleats. I ended up doing 2 pleats in the side backs, on each of the side backs, and then on the center front I did 3 pleats. You can see how that goes here, and it's just distributed. So we've got some very large pleats, but what it does is it doesn't create as much gathering and it lays a little bit nicer, but you still have that fullness of the circle skirt. So you can see that's how big my pleats are. They're actually quite large and they overlap each other on the other ends here. Now we're going to install the back zipper. So this is what that looks like. If you want a tutorial on how to install the zipper, I'll leave a link to a tutorial on that right here. And next we're going to do the facings and adding the piping details. So these are our facings. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach them along the side seams. So I'm just going to pin those in place. And what might be fun is actually using a contrasting color for those facings. And just stitch down there. I also serged the edges and pressed the seams open. So next we are going to take our piping trim and we are going to lay it face down here with the raw edges together and the piping facing in towards the garment. Now make sure that you put it at the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, so not right up against the edge. And then we're going to pin that in place all along the top neck edge and the sleeve edges. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to mark where we're going to stop our stitching. So I'm getting out my seam gauge and the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we need to mark that because you don't want to go past that when you're stitching that on and basting it together. Otherwise you'll get too much bulk in the seams. So this is what that looks like along the dress. And then now we're going to sandwich that in between the facing. So I'm just matching the center notches in here and pinning them in place. And we can use the stitch guide that we had used before, and we're going to do the same stitching all along here. But we are going to stop a little bit with a little bit more area. So you are going to want to stop at 5 centimeters from the shoulder edge to give you enough room to turn it inside out so we can stitch those shoulder seams later. So just mark that and then stitch from your mark to your other mark. So I am actually putting on a zipper foot because it allows me to get nice and close to the edge of that piping. And don't forget to backstitch for extra security here. Now we are going to clip the edges at about 1 inch intervals. And then we're going to trim down the seam allowance so that it's at about 1/8 of an inch. And I'm just adding in a little bit more of those notches just to kind of give it a bit more leeway so that when we turn it, we don't get any puckering. And then give it a nice good press. And you can see that I left the edges where we hadn't stitched at the full seam allowance. Do not trim those off. And now that we've turned it right side out, then we can look at stitching them together. So you're going to put right sides to right sides on the front and back, and you're going to pin them matching up where your piping is, because you don't want the piping to be offset, otherwise it won't look as professional. And I'm just folding the seam allowance back, as you can see, and having the piping be that edge. We're gonna stitch the 5/8 of an inch, then we're gonna take the two lining pieces and we're just gonna twist them over so they're right sides to right sides and stitch them. So I've just got them on my sleeve press here. And then we want to flip it over to the lining side and press under those seam allowances. And then we can take our hand needle and we can stitch them using a nice ladder stitch. And that way it's nice and seamless. Now, if you wanted, you could top stitch them on the other side, but I think that this looks a little bit nicer on the outside of your garment if you do that invisible ladder stitch along the seam line here. And make sure you do that on both sets of your sleeves here. The hem. So you're going to do a 0.5 centimeter double fold and just stitch along the top, and your skirt is done. Now, this dress is a breeze to sew, and I absolutely love the silhouette. The bodice fits me quite well. The only thing that I found didn't quite fit, and I really should have done a muslin, I usually do, but I've been saying this a lot, I keep forgetting to make up a muslin, but on the arm side, and I know it's a boat neck and it's supposed to go a little on your shoulders, but for me, along the back, it needs to be just a little bit deeper. And I think it would look a lot better with that. And it kind of restricts my movement just a little bit. So a few little tweaks to the pattern, which I've already made. So the next time I make this dress, I will make sure that I have the perfect fit. So if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up for me. And I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on how I used the stripes and maybe some new ideas on what you would do with some striped fabric. So until next time, makers, let's get our Sew-Spiration on.